Multiple Choice Madness, prepared and developed by the Academic Success Center. Multiple choice exams have become a very popular way to test students' knowledge. It's important to know how to ace these exams. Today, we will be discussing study habits, structure of a multiple choice question, the good and the bad, tips and tricks, guessing. We'll provide you 2 examples, and there's a practice test you can take at the end. There's one thing to remember when going through this presentation is that no matter how many tips and tricks we provide you, the one thing that will help you pass a test is to study. You must really know and understand the information first. We are going to talk a little bit about how to properly learn the information. So some things to remember are to take good notes in your class lectures and in your textbooks, review your notes soon after the class, review your notes briefly before your next class, and schedule some time at the end of the week for a longer review. There are some important things to remember when reviewing the information. So number 1 would be to take good notes as your teacher tells you what will be on the test. Organize your notes, text, and assignments according to what will be on the test. Estimate the hours you'll need to review the materials. Also, draw up a schedule that blocks units of time and material. Then test yourself on the material and finish your studying the day before the exam. So it's important to remember to get a good night's sleep and feel rested before an exam. So now we're going to review the structure of a multiple choice question. So there's 3 parts. Part number 1 is the stem, which asks the question, poses a problem, or presents an incomplete sentence. Number 2 is the correct response, which is what we're looking for. And number 3 is 4 alternative responses, which are incorrect, and these are often called distractors. So the good thing about multiple choice exams are that they will give you all of the answers. The bad thing is to prevent too many high marks, they try to confuse you with multiple answers. So with that said, we're going to give you some tips and tricks to follow. Number 1 would be cover the answers. After all, they are trying to challenge and confuse you. So when you get in there, look at the question and just put your hand over all the answers. Number 2, read each question or stem carefully. It often takes more than one reading to really understand the question. So to decode the question, some helpful hints are to underline keywords, put the question in your own words, or name the concept from which the question is derived. And that tip we will show in one of our examples at the very end of this presentation. Number 3, try to answer each question in your head before looking at your choices. So if you determine the answer before you look at your choice, you'll lessen the possibility of becoming confused and feel a lot more confident on the answer that you're picking. Number 4, uncover the answers one at a time. Use a systematic process of elimination. So one way to do that is by putting a star beside the answer that you think is correct, an X if you feel it is not the right answer, or a question mark if you are unsure. Again, we'll use these steps in our example at the end. And number 5, if you are unsure, go with your hunch. And if you don't have a hunch, guess unless you are penalized for doing so. We're going to talk a little bit about guessing. So you're going to always want to guess on an exam if there's no penalty. And then don't guess if you're being penalized. So some classes will actually take a mark off your exam if you've got the answer incorrect. So just be careful of that. That goes along with reading the instructions at the very beginning. It's also important to use the hints from the questions you know to answer the questions you don't know. Some students question if they should change their first answer. So with that said, you should change your first answer when you are sure of the correction or other cues in the test cue you to change that answer. I always remember being told to go with my first hunch, which I normally would agree. But if something in another question cues you to the answer of a question you already passed, go back and change your first answer. Here's some guidelines for guessing. If two answers are similar except for one or two words, choose one of these answers. If two answers have a similar sounding or looking words, example, intermediate or intermittent, choose one of these answers. If the answer calls for a sentence completion, eliminate the answers that do not form grammatically correct sentences. If two quantities are almost the same, choose one of those. If an answer covers a wide range, example 4.5, 66.7, 88.7, and 90.8, choose one of those in the middle. If none of the techniques fit for you, close your eyes and go for it, unless you're being penalized. Now we're going to review two examples of multiple choice questions. If a wolf or a dog rolls onto its back like a puppy, we are witnessing A, a threat display, B, a sexual display, C, a ritualized combat, or B, an appeasement display. So what we're probably thinking is, I'm not sure of the term, but the animal is either being playful or giving into a threat of some kind. So a threat display, we're going to put an X beside that. That would be right, except the threat is coming from something else, not the wolf or dog. B, a sexual display, we're going to put an X because we know that's incorrect. C, ritualized combat. Well, we're going to put a question mark because that could be the right answer. And D, appeasement display. We'll also put a question mark because we're not sure. So to break this down even farther, we took ritualized combat with other animals and it didn't seem like this. The animals acted equal until one backed down. So this example could only be part of a ritualized combat. We also took appeasement as a type of dominant submissive behavior, and this seems the better, more complete answer. The question is referring to the concept of dominant submissive behavior. Here, the concept is translated as D, an appeasement display. Note that this example, the concept is in the choices, and the question is an example of that concept. Example number 2. Which of the following study skills is most likely to result in success? A, determining which chapters will be on the test. B, reading the headings and subheadings in your textbook while reading it. C, putting the textbook under your pillow the night before the exam. Or D, using the headings and subheadings in your textbook while reading it. So already we can see that B and D are very similar. So what we're thinking is, I can't really answer this one until I see the choices of study skills, but I know the course has constantly emphasized two principles: be active rather than passive, and choose what works for you. So A, which was determining the chapters that will be on the test, we're going to put an X. This would help you, but not as much, because knowing what chapters will be on the test does not mean that you necessarily learn anything in those chapters. B, reading the headings and subheadings in your textbook while reading it, we're going to put a question mark beside that, because that could be the correct answer. It sounds right, but we're not sure. C, we're going to put an X, because we know nobody learns through osmosis. So putting the textbook under the pillow the night before probably won't be helping you. And D, using the headings and subheadings in your textbook while reading it, we're going to put a question mark because that could be the correct answer. B and D are very similar. Simply reading the headings is not as active or as powerful as using the headings. So D is most likely to lead to success. Feel free to take this online multiple choice practice test on anatomy and physiology, a course that usually has multiple choice tests and exams. If you'd like more information, here's the list of references I used to create this presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and for additional online support, visit newell.uoit.ca.